Hey all and welcome. Holly and I today are going to have a chat about protein for weight loss, and we're going to cover some of the key areas and mechanisms of effect that help us with this. We're going to keep this pretty short and brief and have a quick conversation about some of these takeaways that we can utilize and understand. The main one that we're going to touch on to start with is the thermic effect. The thermic effect of protein is around about 40%, compared to what we would see with fat and carbohydrates, which is around about 5 to 8%, so a lot lower. What that means, thermic effect, is basically the amount of calories that are burnt to extract calories from your food. So how many net calories you would be left with. To give you an example, if we just keep it simple, if I had 100 calories that I consumed in just pure protein, my body would spend 40 calories to give me 60 of that 100. Now, the main one with that, to kind of tie in with that as well, is how it's satiating. So it's obviously a lot more satiating than our other macros, proteins, and compared to our fats and carbohydrates. Holly's going to touch on that a little bit more as to why.
Yeah, so I guess an example of that would be if you had a steak before training, you're sort of going to feel like full, lethargic. You're not going to feel great. And then if you had a banana before training, you're going to have a lot of energy because it's going to be turned around into energy quickly, the carbs are. Whereas protein is not going to do that. It's going to stay in your stomach. It's going to make you feel fuller for longer. And it's also going to help with your like lack of appetite, I guess, because you're going to be full for longer.
Yeah, so you're less likely to go and overeat on something else. I mean, the one time that might be different is something like a protein shake where something's pre-broken down.
Hmm.
So we talk about the thermic effect of protein being really high. The one scenario where that would be different is in a protein. And the reason is it's already pre-broken down, so that digestion process is changed. It's a
Hmm.
lot faster for your body to absorb it. It doesn't have to go through that process where it's expending as much energy to break down the energy, which is why you can have half a protein shake before training, still have the protein macro, but still feel like you've just had half a banana.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones that we'll talk about is your increases in lean mass.
Yeah.
So if you are adequate with your protein intake and you do start to see an increase in lean mass, you will start to see an increase in your BMR.
Hmm.
So you'll have an uptake in basically the amount of calories your body's going to expend throughout the day. For 1 kilo, it's anywhere from 50 to 75 calories per day, without you having to change anything. And that's just how the body functions. It is expensive to carry lean mass. It's functional mass, so it costs energy for that lean mass to perform tasks or contractions, compared to fat mass, which is what we call a non-functional mass in terms of a physical function. Um, it's not really going to cost anything for the fat mass to be there other than you just carrying that extra body weight around.
Yeah.
So you often see, if we use Dwayne Johnson as an example, you're probably looking at, he's on about 5,000, 6,000 calories a day. He's a big bloke who carries a lot of lean muscle mass. And then you could have someone on the other end of the spectrum who's on 1,500 calories a day, who's 70 kilos, marathon runner.
Hmm.
Um, but one, and they're both at the same body fat percentage.
Yeah. And the hard thing when it comes to weight loss is losing fat but maintaining muscle.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to go into a deficit. So
Hmm.
if you are eating in a deficit, it's never going to be 100% fat mass that is expended.
Yeah.
We'll be touching on that a little bit more as to how that would actually work. We'll put some numbers there and we'll release it to the guys. But we do tend to see, in a good scenario, about an 80-20
Yeah.
is probably the best that I've personally seen. And that's 80% fat loss with 20% muscle loss.
Yeah. And I guess in like a simple term, the best way to overcome that is to ensure that you're uh, putting enough protein into your body to sort of recover and repair those muscles and keep them alive, I guess, while you're also trying to lose weight by having less of the other macros.
Yeah, and a great strategy is just making sure that carbohydrates are there around training. So your energy source is available for you to use when exercising. So you are in the deficit, but you're not going to burn through your muscle mass while training. So that is a strategy that you will see. People will prioritize their carbohydrates in the morning till lunchtime if they train in the morning. And if they train in the evening, they'll try and prioritize it lunchtime to dinner time.
Yeah. And for in terms of repair and recovery, I guess does protein really help with that, and how does it help with that?
Yeah, it does. I mean, a nice simple way to think about it. You're going to have better training, so your quality of training is going to be improved. So that might be something as simple as the desired stimulus. So your deadlift, you're able to work at a percentage that's going to create stimulus for change or adaptation, which would be an increase in lean mass. Which, as we just spoke about, that's now going to have the other mechanism of action, which is increasing your BMR as well. So not only are you training better because you're recovered, and you're able to work better percentages and more accurate percentages, but you're also putting on that lean mass from that stimulus. It's also going to allow you to up your quantity if needed. So normally you'll see quality improve first, which is the main one. And then if someone has a really high training age, so they've been training 4 days a week for 4 years, they might need that fifth day or that extra day of stimulus that allows them to have that extra day. And then same thing, that creates the stimulus for the change, and then that roll-on effect from there.
Yeah. I guess it also helps like reducing cravings and snacking when you don't need to, obviously, because you're going to be fuller for longer, like we touched on earlier. The snacks and the cravings that you would have if you weren't having enough protein sort of make you a bit more lethargic and a bit crappy when you're at the gym as well, and then you move poorly. Like you said, the quality is the first to go, and then that's obviously going to have a big impact on your recovery as well if you're moving poorly at the gym.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to maximize your net gain from time invested. So the time you're putting in at the gym, you want to get as much out of every second you have here as possible. And that comes down to what you're putting into your body. It comes down to your water intake as well. That's probably something we can touch on as well. With the increases in protein, you do need an increase in water.
Yeah.
It is something that we generally see most people kind of neglect. They'll go and up their protein or up their food, and then they'll tend to not really address their water. A very simple trick to do that is with every meal, make sure you have a full glass of water.
And the increase in water, is that for digestion purposes?
Yeah, so it's going to help with hydration, but it's also going to help with the digestion of the food, because water is part of how we move nutrients around the body, and it is going to be utilized for most of our mechanisms of action. And then we are going to obviously excrete water when we need to excrete byproducts from that process as well. So if we have an increase in intake, we're also probably going to find we're going to the toilet a little bit more. We might have that increase in training, which means if it's summer like it is now, we're starting to go into the warmer weather. All right, we're going to be sweating more. We're going to be expelling more fluids. We're going to need to make sure we intake more fluids as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the biggest one with this, a question that we get asked a lot is, how do we maximize our protein intake if we are looking at, all right, I need to eat 160 grams for the day. Now you'll hear that 30 gram rule per meal be spoken about a lot. It's not that you can't have more. There is kind of a tipping point, so it's not linear. So what I mean by that is, your protein intake, if you just keep increasing your protein intake, you don't get linear gains. It's kind of capped. So it's to do with your pool of aminos. Once your pool of aminos is full, whatever protein you eat from there on is just going to be used as energy. So you're eating all this extra protein in one meal, your amino pool's full, all right, so your body just burns it as fuel. As where if you can make sure you space it out throughout the day, you're more likely to keep your amino pools full, all right, and maximize your lean mass and your recovery by doing that. So every meal has 30 grams, for example, is a really good way to balance out your intake for the day versus, let's say you go and your morning breakfast is just oats with no protein or anything like that. So it doesn't have protein, but it's high in carbs. And then your dinner, you're having 2 steaks. So you're having 70 grams of protein for dinner. So you're still hitting your protein, but you're kind of maximizing it in one meal.
Yeah.
It's not an optimal way. It's not that it's wrong. You're just not going to maximize what we're talking about with the increase in lean mass.
Right. So spread it out throughout the day as much as you can.
Yeah, because
all different forms.
If we touch on that amino pool, it's empty in the morning. All right. So let's say in the morning that pool's empty, so your recovery is a little bit down because of that. but then at night it's topped up.
Mm.
As where if you can just keep it topped up all the time, you're maximizing your recovery through that 24-hour period.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions, chuck them in the comments or reach out to the coaches. Protein is one of those main macros. It's your most important macros. We want to keep it nice and simple. It's protein, calories, and then balance your fats and carbohydrates to suit focusing on your consistency.